Have you ever wanted something so badly, only to watch yourself do absolutely nothing? You knew exactly what you wanted. To start the business, apply for the dream job, ask for the promotion, speak up in the meeting, start creating videos, write the first page, launch the idea that has been living inside your head for years. You imagined how your life could change. You even promised yourself, tomorrow I'll finally do it. But tomorrow came, and somehow nothing happened. Maybe I'm not ready. I need to learn a little more. What if people laugh? What if I embarrass myself? What if I fail? So you waited another week, another month, maybe another year. And the strangest part is, while your dreams stood perfectly still, your life kept moving forward. Someone else started the business. Someone else got the opportunity. Someone else spoke up. Someone else became the person you secretly wanted to become. And every time it happened, you told yourself the same story. Maybe they're just more confident than I am. But what if confidence has nothing to do with it? What if the real reason you've been holding yourself back has been quietly controlling your decisions since the day you were born? Because here's something most people never realize. Fear of failure doesn't usually stop you with one dramatic decision. It works much more quietly than that.
Wait a little longer. You're not ready yet. Play it safe. Don't risk what you already have.
It never sounds like fear. It sounds like logic. It sounds responsible. It sounds reasonable. And that's exactly what makes it so dangerous.
Millions of people wake up every morning believing they're making rational decisions, when in reality, they're negotiating with an ancient survival system that was never designed for the modern world. A system that can't tell the difference between standing in front of a hungry predator and standing in front of an audience, between being rejected by your tribe and being rejected in a job interview. To your brain, both can feel like a threat. But here's the question that changes everything. If fear is supposed to protect us, why does it so often keep us trapped? Why does it stop brilliant students from pursuing their dreams? Why do talented entrepreneurs never launch? Why do capable people settle for lives they know they're meant to outgrow? The answer isn't what most people think. And once you understand it, you'll begin to notice an invisible force shaping almost every important decision you've ever made. Not just your career, not just your money, not just your relationships, your entire life. Because the greatest prison most people will ever live inside isn't built from walls. It's built from one emotion they never learned to understand. Imagine a baby learning to walk. He stands up, takes one shaky step, and falls. Does he stop forever? Does he sit there thinking, maybe walking just isn't for me? Of course not. He stands up again, and again, and again. Nobody teaches him persistence. Nobody gives him a motivational speech. Nobody tells him to believe in himself. Failure simply isn't part of his identity yet. Falling is just information. It's how he learns. Now imagine that same person, 25 years later. He has an idea for a business. He dreams of changing careers. He wants to ask someone out. He wants to write a book. He wants to post his first YouTube video. But before he even begins, his mind races ahead. What if people laugh? What if it doesn't work? What if everyone realizes I'm not good enough? And without taking a single step, he gives up. What changed? How did the fearless child become the fearful adult? Because somewhere along the way, failure stopped being something we experienced and became something we became. As children, we heard things like, be careful, don't make mistakes, you should have done better. What happened to the other 5 marks? Look how well your classmate did. At first, they seem like harmless comments, even well-intentioned. But the human brain is constantly searching for patterns. And slowly, without realizing it, it begins writing a rule. Mistakes are dangerous. Failure means disappointment. If I fail, people may stop valuing me. The strange thing is, your brain doesn't store these lessons like facts in a textbook. It stores them like survival instructions. Because to an ancient brain, being rejected by your tribe wasn't just emotionally painful. It could be life-threatening. For thousands of years, humans survived together. Acceptance meant protection. Rejection meant uncertainty. And even though society has changed, your nervous system still treats social rejection as something deeply threatening. That's why criticism can keep you awake at night, why embarrassment can replay in your mind for years, why one negative comment often outweighs 100 compliments. Your brain isn't trying to make you miserable. It's trying to keep you connected, safe, accepted. But here's where everything begins to go wrong. The brain doesn't simply protect you from real danger. It also protects you from imagined danger. It doesn't wait to see if you'll fail. It tries to prevent the possibility altogether. So before you apply for the job, before you start the business, before you ask the question, before you take the risk, your brain quietly whispers, maybe later. You're not ready. Wait until you're better. And because those thoughts arrive in your own voice, they don't feel like fear. They feel like common sense. That's the greatest trick fear ever learned. It doesn't shout. It doesn't panic. It simply convinces you that staying exactly where you are is the most logical decision. And if that happens often enough, comfort slowly transforms into a cage. Not because the door is locked, but because you stop trying to open it. The question is, if our brains are designed to protect us, why does failure hurt so much more than success feels good? The answer lies in one of the most fascinating discoveries in modern psychology. And once scientists uncovered it, they realized something astonishing. The human brain doesn't measure gains and losses equally. It never has. Imagine I give you a choice. You can receive $100 right now. Or you can flip a coin. Heads, you win $200. Tails, you win nothing. Which would you choose? Now, let's change the question. Imagine you already have $100, but now you must flip a coin. Heads, you keep everything. Tails, you lose it all. The money involved is exactly the same. The mathematics haven't changed. Yet suddenly, the decision feels completely different. Why? Because your brain doesn't experience gains and losses equally. Losing $100 hurts far more than gaining $100 feels good. That might sound obvious, but this simple idea transformed psychology forever. When psychologist Daniel Kahneman and economist Amos Tversky began studying human decision-making, they discovered something astonishing. People weren't making irrational decisions because they lacked intelligence. They were making irrational decisions because their brains were designed to avoid loss above almost everything else. This became known as prospect theory, and it revealed one of the most powerful forces shaping human behavior. The fear of losing is often stronger than the desire to gain. Think about that for a moment. Most people don't avoid starting a business because they hate success. They avoid it because they fear losing stability. They don't stay silent in meetings because they have nothing to say. They stay silent because they fear looking foolish. They don't avoid asking someone out because they don't want love. They avoid asking because rejection feels emotionally expensive. Notice what's happening. The goal never disappeared. The fear simply became bigger than the reward. And once that happens, your brain quietly changes the question. Instead of asking, "What could I gain?" it begins asking, "What could I lose?" That single shift changes everything. Because every opportunity now comes attached to an invisible price tag. Starting a business might cost your savings. Changing careers might cost your security. Speaking in public might cost your reputation. Trying something new might cost your pride. Eventually, the safest life begins to feel like the smartest life. Not because it's more fulfilling, but because your brain mistakes familiarity for safety. This is why people stay in jobs they hate, relationships that no longer serve them, and routines that quietly drain the life out of them. Because uncertainty feels more dangerous than unhappiness they've already learned to survive. Whether those losses are real or imagined almost doesn't matter. Your brain reacts before reality has a chance to answer. That's why fear feels so convincing. Not because it predicts the future, but because it magnifies the cost of failure, while quietly shrinking the cost of doing nothing. And that's where the trap begins. Imagine two people standing in front of the same closed door. Behind that door could be a better career, a healthier relationship, a successful company, a completely different life. One person sees possibility, the other sees risk. The door hasn't changed, only the story inside their mind has. Here's the heartbreaking part. The brain is so focused on protecting you from immediate pain that it rarely calculates the cost of missed opportunities. It remembers the embarrassment of trying, but it forgets the quiet regret of never trying at all. Years later, people rarely ask, "What if I had failed?" Instead, they ask, "What if I had started? What if I had taken the chance? What if I hadn't let fear make the decision for me?" Regret has a strange way of changing shape. At first, we fear the pain of failure. But with enough time, many people begin fearing something much heavier: the pain of never discovering what they were truly capable of. And perhaps that's the greatest illusion fear ever creates. It convinces you that doing nothing is the safer choice, when in reality, doing nothing may be the most expensive decision you'll ever make. But if fear is exaggerating the cost of failure, why do some people seem almost immune to it? Why do entrepreneurs keep building after losing everything? Why do elite athletes return after devastating defeats? Why do inventors continue experimenting after hundreds of failed attempts? Were they simply born different? Or did they learn to see failure in a completely different way? The answer might change everything you believe about courage. Imagine two people standing at the exact same starting line. Both have a dream, both have talent, both work hard, and both fail. The first person goes home and says, "I knew I wasn't good enough." The second person goes home and asks, "What can this teach me?" The failure was identical. The outcome couldn't be more different. Why? Because failure doesn't change your future. The meaning you attach to failure does. This might be one of the most important discoveries modern psychology has ever made. For decades, psychologist Carol Dweck studied why some people seemed to grow stronger after failure, while others quietly gave up. At first, researchers assumed the difference was intelligence, or talent, or confidence. But the evidence pointed somewhere unexpected. It wasn't ability that separated them. It was belief. More specifically, what they believed failure actually meant. Some people saw failure as a verdict, a final judgment on who they were. I failed, therefore I am a failure. Others saw failure as feedback. I failed, therefore I learned something I didn't know yesterday. Because the brain doesn't simply react to reality. It reacts to the meaning it creates. Imagine touching a hot stove. Your brain learns, don't do that again. That's useful. Now imagine giving a presentation that doesn't go well, or hearing someone criticize your work. Your brain can accidentally create another rule. Don't take risks again. One lesson protects your hand. The other quietly limits your life. The strange thing is, most of us never realize these rules exist. We simply begin living by them. We stop applying for difficult jobs. We stop sharing our ideas. Not because we consciously decided to, but because somewhere deep inside, our brain concluded safety is better than possibility. And every time we obey that rule, it grows stronger. Neuroscientists often describe the brain as an efficiency machine. The more often you think a particular thought, the easier it becomes to think it again. It's like walking through a forest. Fear works exactly the same way. Every avoided conversation, every opportunity ignored, every dream postponed strengthens the trail, until hesitation begins to feel like your personality. But here's the remarkable part. The opposite is also true, because the brain that learns fear can also learn courage. Not overnight, not through positive thinking, but through evidence. Every time you do something your brain predicted would destroy you and discover that you're still standing, your mind updates its map of reality. The next step feels slightly easier, not because the fear disappeared, but because the story began to change. This is why courageous people often look fearless from the outside. What we don't see are the hundreds of moments where they acted while their heart was racing, where they spoke despite uncertainty, where they failed, learned, adjusted, and tried again. Courage was never the absence of fear. It was the refusal to let fear write the ending. And perhaps that's the greatest misunderstanding about successful people. We imagine they possess extraordinary confidence, when in reality, many of them simply built a different relationship with failure. Instead of asking, "What if I fail?" they learned to ask, "What if this is how I grow?" That single question changes everything. Because once failure becomes a teacher instead of a judge, it loses much of its power. But there's still one mystery left. If changing our thinking is so powerful, why do so many people understand these ideas, yet continue making the same fearful decisions? The answer lies deeper than mindset. It lies inside the habits your brain repeats every single day. And that's where real transformation begins. Imagine reaching the end of your life. Not today, not tomorrow, 40 or 50 years from now. You're sitting quietly, looking back at the story of your life, the successes, the failures, the people you loved, the opportunities you took, and the ones you didn't. Now imagine someone asks you one simple question. What held you back the most? Most people think the answer would be money, or bad luck, or lack of talent. But after decades of interviewing people at the end of their lives, researchers and caregivers have noticed something surprisingly consistent. People rarely regret the times they failed. They regret the times they never tried, the business they never started, the conversation they never had, the dream they slowly convinced themselves to forget, the risk they postponed until the right time. Because the right time never arrived. Fear has a strange way of making today feel safe, while quietly stealing tomorrow. It asks for almost nothing, just one more delay, one more excuse, one more year. And because the price is paid slowly, we rarely notice what it's costing us, until one day we look back and realize we traded possibility for certainty, growth for comfort, the life we wanted for the life that simply felt safer. But here's the truth that fear desperately hopes you'll never discover. Fear has never been trying to predict your future. It's been trying to protect your present, and those are not the same thing. Your brain doesn't wake up each morning asking, how can I help this person become extraordinary? It asks something much simpler. How can I make sure they survive today? That's why it chooses familiarity over uncertainty, comfort over challenge, routine over growth. Not because it's broken, because it's doing exactly what it evolved to do. Once you understand that, something remarkable begins to happen. You stop treating fear like an enemy. You stop believing it has all the answers. Instead, you begin to see it for what it really is. An alarm system. And like every alarm, it isn't always accurate. Sometimes it warns you about real danger. Sometimes it's triggered by burnt toast. The problem isn't that the alarm exists. The problem is allowing it to make every important decision in your life. Because the people we admire, the entrepreneurs, the artists, the scientists, the athletes, the explorers, weren't people who never felt fear. They simply stopped asking fear for permission. They understood something that most people spend their entire lives trying to learn. Fear can ride with you, but it should never be allowed to hold the steering wheel. So perhaps the question isn't, how do I eliminate fear? Maybe that's impossible. Maybe the better question is, who do I become every time I refuse to let fear decide for me? Because every courageous decision rewrites a tiny part of your brain. Every uncomfortable conversation, every difficult beginning, every failed attempt, every lesson learned, none of them are wasted. They're evidence that you're becoming someone your younger self never believed you could be. And maybe that's what courage has always been. Not the absence of fear, but the decision to move, even when fear comes with you. Because one day, you'll tell the story of your life. The only question is, will fear be the author, or merely one of the characters? In the next episode, we're going to explore something even more surprising. Why are some of the smartest people in the world often the ones who fear failure the most? Because intelligence doesn't always free us from fear. Sometimes it quietly becomes the reason fear grows stronger. And once you understand why, you'll never look at perfectionism the same way again. If this made you see fear a little differently, leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to understand the psychology behind the choices you make every day, subscribe to the Takar Files. See you in the next episode.